All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004, that's Mobile APIs and Frameworks, in the summer 2023 semester at Georgian, and it's week 4, part 3 of our broadcast and recording. All right, so where last we left off, we made our model class, right? And we can't do anything with our database unless we have a model class, right? Model class, the first thing we need. We also have controllers. We're going to get to that in a second, but we have roots. And what I want to do right now with our controller is I want to make a new file. We're going to call this the movie controller. So movie, right? .ts. Again, similar to the movie model, right? So movie controller, movie model. Here's our movie controller. So movie controller, what is it and why do we need it? First, we need to import Express. Let's do that. So we're going to say import Express from Express. Let's do that just to make sure we have everything for routing and all that kind of stuff. Probably don't need it, but let's do it. Next part, we need to import the movie model. Import, again, we're going to say import movie from, and we're going to say /models/movie. Okay, so that's that we're going to get. Movie now represents a movie object. Okay, that's what it does. Okay, it's like the movie control, the movie model. And if I hover over that, it just tells you that. It says movie is of type model. That's what it is. Okay. All right, and one thing we can do with it is if I go movie.find, we can do a movie.find. I can find movies. I can do whatever I want, right? So that's what I want to be able to do with it. I also want to have some functions that I want to export, right? So instead of export default, I can use export. And I can say export, and I can have the name, right, of the function. In this case, it's going to be movie list, right? And that we're going to say that's equal to, right, a function. So this is kind of the way we can do it. Export movie list equals to a function, right? Or I could say export function, try this out, movie list, right? And the movie list is going to get in a request, response, and next. We need this part, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to do one of these. Now it says request, response, and next. It doesn't know what it is. We know that if I was going to look at the movie, the index TS, that this is of type request. That's what this is. This is of type response. And this type is next function. That's what it is. Okay, so we want the same things here using Express, right? So I'm going to go back to the movies. I'll say this is of type request, right? This is of type response. This is of type next function. Next function. We need to do that explicitly because we're making a controller function to do this stuff, the movie list controller, right? And in here, I want to be able to, using the movie model, return a value, right, for this thing. So that's what we want to be able to do. So how does Mongoose work with that for you guys to remember, right? Let's go back to here. So if I go back to Mongoose, so we want to be able to do some queries, right? And we want to do queries with the model class, right? So we're going to say the model, whatever the model is, find. Let's see how this works. So, so here's an example. I want to be able to, now this is using await, right? Where I want to find, and I want to return an object from the database. That's what I want to be able to do. I want to return everything from the database. That's what I want to do, okay? And you can also find by ID, right? So here's await, whatever the model is, find by ID. Find and delete, right? You can find and delete something, and so on. But really, all I need to do is find, and I want to return everything, okay? So that's what I want to do, just the model, I want to do a query. Let's go back to queries. And I want to do model.find. This is the one I want. So model.find is what I want. So really it just says, all I need to put in there is like, well, model.find, and then it should do something, right? So that's what it's going to return. what does find return? Right, so if I look at find, this is what I want to look at. It says filter is an object ID, right? And the projection is an object, a string, or an array. That's what it returns, right? And returns the query, this thing right here. Okay, so that means that I really want to, all I want to do here is I want to return the, if I did it correctly, movie.find, right? And I want to find everything, right? So what does this return? What is the return type of movie list? Movie list now, right? It's going to return a query, right? Movie.find is what it's going to return, but it's a query that it's going to return. So that's what it's going to do. How do I return an object from a database? Let's look it up. So if I want to use Mongoose to return, we'll use ChatGPT for this, right? So I'll say ChatGPT, right? Sure, let's log in. And I'm showing you proper usages of all this stuff so that you can use it, right? So you see what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, all right? So I want to, it's not letting me today. There we go. Need to return or need to use Mongoose in Node.js, or we'll say Express application to return a list of movies from a MongoDB database. I just need to return the entire collection. So let's see what it does. So I'll tell you something that we're missing as well, the collection that we want to connect to and all that kind of stuff. All right, so we installed a Mongoose. This is all good. We did an app. This is the app portion of the thing. We listened for the connection. This is actually old. We use require here as well, right? And then what we want to do is, yes, it tells us to replace. And now we have to define a schema for the movie database, title and director. Here's an example. We made a model, and afterwards we're going to do an app.get, movie.find, right? And now this is what we're missing, this piece, because we did everything except for this part right here. Movie.find was good, but we need to actually return the movie. So response.json is what we want to do. That is what we want to do, this res.json. Getting the query doesn't do anything for us. Responding or returning something is what we want to be able to do. So movies.find and then error movies, where error, if it's a console error, return a status, and so on. Let's fix this problem. So we're almost there. We kind of had it, but not really, right? We want to say is movie.find. And the first part is we want to find everything. Remember, the curly braces means everything. And then we want to have some kind of callback function, right, that we want to use. And that's the next part, which is I want to have error and the data that I want to return, right? That's what I want. And that is what I want to return. I don't want to return this. I want to do movie.find, right? And I want to have the curly braces that I want to have in here. So that is the thing that I want. And I need to pipe this off with this. That is going to kind of do a movie.find thing. And inside here, I want to respond with a JSON object. So I will say something like if error. I'm going to come back to the error parts in a second. If on error, then what do I want to do, right? If there's an error. Well, I definitely want to return a status of 500. If there's some kind of problem, right, then I want a res, and just like it says here, a res status. This is a status code that I'm going to return, which is 500, right? And it's telling me to send an internal error, an internal server error. Let's try that. So we'll say internal server error. Now, let me talk about these errors and the data and all that kind of stuff in a second, right, to see what this is. Movie.find works, right, but this part with TypeScript does not work, right? And then if error, what if there's an error? We want to do a console error. So console.error, this is correct. We want to pass out the error retrieving movies and the error it is. So we'll say error retrieving movies, right? And where we actually kind of type in the error that's also there. That's a console error. There's the status if we have an error, and that kind of goes inside here. And that's in the if-else statement. This res status actually happens in here, right? Res status 500. Otherwise, what if there's no error, right? If there's no error, then I want to res.json. I want to pass out the data from the movie. I want to return the data. That's what I want to return, right? And of course, what I want to do is return res status here, and I want to return our res.json here for the data. But what about data and what about the error? Well, remember what this is. This is of type error. So if I typed in error, that's okay. And data is our package. Look at the find. Find tells us we're going to have the document that we want. That's what it is. So, and here's something else though that we're going to do. Movie is the first part. Curly brace is the thing we're going to look for. Then it's curly brace. So empty, empty, empty. Then the document that we want, right? Which is of type iMovie. That's what it's basically saying here, right? And it says find the document. And up here it tells us all the projections that we need. Let's also go and look at to help us here in our TypeScript side. So TypeScript, it says, yeah, we want to do a query. We want to, to use our user, object IDs and types, and all this kind of stuff is what we want to do. And it says we have here's schemas, statics, populate, and subdocuments. We know that this is what we want to kind of do, right? We want to get data, but what data is it when we do our query? Because this is the way we want to do this. So we want to do this find. I want to be able to return this, find name, or find everything. That's what this is. The await basically is the type that we're going to do. That's the await example, right? And we need an example that we actually kind of get data back. So what is this error and what is this data? Well, we know the data is going to be of type iMovie, is it not? Right? That's the movie we're going to get back, iMovie. So what could it be the type? Well, it says next function, no. How about if I said iMovie? Is that something that we can get? Well, I don't have access to iMovie, right? We know that the data is a data package, right? So, and we could say that it's one thing we could always do is we don't know what it is. What we could say is any, right? That would definitely work, right? If we say data is any, then it says data, it says it can't be because it's got to be of type object because we're returning a JSON object. So it could be object, right? We could say that, right? Because that's what we want to return here, res JSON data. It says, unfortunately, it says data object expected 0 arguments but got 1. res.json, and I'm going to pass out the data for this object. So what does JSON do? It says body.json with a promise. Okay, so we're going to come back to this res return JSON, return res JSON, right? Because basically we did it already. We went to our movie routes here, and in our movie route we said, I want to return res JSON. How will that work? Which is something that we wanted to do. So what is the problem, for this one? I'm just going to go to my notes for a second, make sure I get this right, because it's just a bit of syntax, which is not a big issue, right? Just 1 second. There we go. And uno momento, and we'll have it right there for us. Almost correct. Yeah. Shall return that. One second. And I want to make sure that it is right. I don't want to give you the wrong information, and that's why I'm going through this process right now, guys. I'm so sorry. Just want to make sure you guys are good. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. There we go. Okay. All right. Almost correct. Almost correct. Okay. Let's try this again. Back to my roots. I was getting there. I was going off topic here. La la la. If air res render. Okay, so typically what I would do is I would do this, but I wouldn't put that in place. Let me just do one more time. Let's just comment this part out, this block. One sec. That's what happens when you're live coding. I don't want to waste time for you. Movie dot find. And then you're going to do a function with an error and the movies collection, which is what we want here. Filter, no, that was correct. And the projection, this is all new. So they've modified some stuff, of course, right? Let's do back to ChatGPT. This is different than what I did. So this is a new thing. Okay, now show me the step 5. Show me step 5 using TypeScript. Beautiful thing. When it decides to do it. Here it is. Yeah, I know I did that. I said step 5 only, but of course give me everything. Yeah. These are all good things. And the connection we did already. Read the movie schema, no problem. And this is what I want right here. Yep, error movies if error. I did this already. And then res JSON movies, which is the thing. Huh. Yeah, because what it needs is this. One more thing. One more time. One more time. It's going to feed it the errors back. Yep. So it says the next one is projection. What else can you do? The next one is the query options. And the next one is the query options iMovie. So the first one is the projection type, iMovie. No. If I say the callback function, let's look at the filter type that I can use. These are options. These are overloaded functions that I can use. So document, and that's what we're going to return, a type document at the end of the day. Right, the document collection, unknown, iMovie. So I want to make sure I get this right. And omit types. Yep. So if I did that, and if I return a function there, the air and the movie, that does not compute because it says there is no function we can put there. So let's back it up one. That makes sense, but that it doesn't like that, doesn't like that, and doesn't like that. So that is something that's changed. Okay, let's look up an example. So changes, woohoo! Love changes, amazing changes. Mongoose with TypeScript example. Hate looking stuff up, guys, but I'm so sorry. Starting some of the TypeScript. Okay, and And I want to make sure this is good. And a new schema, we did it. And let's do our first query. Schema. So close, I know it. Interface. Yep, we know that. Export function, get user by ID. Okay, users, return users.filter, don't care about that. And they've got assertions, no. So we'll say return a collection of objects from MongoDB using Mongoose and TypeScript. Let's see if that works. That's what I wanted. Something has changed. I love when things change. It causes me to have all kinds of hiccups, but it is what it is. TypeScript the fancy way. La 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 la. We made an interface. And I'm just checking to see, there it is. Return. Okay. We have methods. Find my user schema statics. We don't care about that. I want the model. We made a user document here, and we don't care about user documents. So we're going to do that here. These are just things. Express post. There we go. So I want to return JSON data. Why isn't that working? You know, things that work today don't work tomorrow. So let's just go back and, or vice versa. Let's go back to that. Yeah. Working on it, guys. I will complete this today. I swear to God. Which means that it's on me to do. Stay later if I must. So I did it. Movie.find. And I return void, right? Okay, so this returns void. I wasn't wrong there. And just going to accept these errors for a second because I don't need, it will actually do that part. So I can do a function where I have an error. Status 500 and the data that it's going to return. res.json. Can't return anything because it's not returning anything. It's just going to give us a status. And this is an express request. Express.response, which is going to, which should hold up the issue. Express response is an express request. So if I was going to do a response and a request response, one sec guys. Got to be a little bit more organized here. That's it. Express response, return JSON data. Data is not of type object. What type is it? Well, let's say type any. That's okay for now. We're going to come back to that. Whenever I don't know what it is, I'm going to come back to it. It could be a document that I'm returning, but it's really like a document collection, right? So a collection of documents or an array of documents. And that's what this function does, this movie list thing. So this is really, we'll call this display movie list, because that's what this does, display movie list. And let's just see how this works. So now that we have our, we don't have any errors anymore, and we're getting request, response, and next function from Express. We actually can just do this if I'm not wrong. Save. Right? And now what we need to do is we need to import this into our models. So, sorry, into our routes. So under routes, right, we can just, this is get the movie controller. And the way this looks like is import, movie controller from /controllers/movie. And then now movie controller, it says is declared, but its value is never read. And it also says modules has no default export function, right? So it's not like we want the entire movie controller. What we want is actually a specific function from it, which is the display movie list, right? That's what that does. So display movie list is what we want. And then what we want to do is we want to call the display movie list from here. So instead of this, we're going to say display movie list, right? Where we pass in the request, response, and next object inside there. Okay, that's what it's going to be like. So that's kind of what it looks like now. We're going to keep this the same. This is just our default save. And then if we did everything correctly, then we should be able to go back to our localhost here. It's not broken. And if I go to movie list, then we should see not that. Okay, so this is new. So this where it says movie list, movie.find, no longer accessible call. This is a new thing that just broke, right? So movie.find no longer accepts a callback is what it says, function for this. So now that how, and this is all the new stuff from MongoDB. Like I told you, things have changed. So then how do we get our document from this? So a query. So movie.find So what do we do? Is it a promise? It's all promises now. And then it executes that query. Movie.find, and then await, find all documents, find by ID. I need more examples. Okay, find and delete. And that's why it's not working. It doesn't accept the callback, it uses promises. Find and remove. I love when things change. Returns a query. Okay. So that's why it was giving us all that guff. It was basically saying, hey man, you know, you're wrong, and I was ignoring it, and of course it doesn't do that anymore. It does movie.find. We want to return all. We want to return all. It doesn't take a callback, right? So then what's the new syntax? Come on, help me out. So cast catch. Maybe we'll say then. I bet you yeah. So find everything, and after we're done, then what are we going to do? When we're fulfilled, we want to return res JSON, right? And on error, we want to do something else. Callback to execute when the promise is resolved. Okay. So moving to find, and then we want to res dot. Oh, we need a callback here. So we need a function. This is where the callback goes. And the function, we do a catch, where we do a function for the error on rejected. What we do when we're rejected. We do that other thing before. This is all new. Okay, and this is great. This is fantastic. Actually, I like promises more, right? We just have to figure this out. So we're going to say res.json, and we're going to return the data that's here. Actually, the data that's there is going to go here. And what is that data? It's of type document. Perfect. And this is of type document, right? That's what's going to happen. Okay, but what about if we catch? What if there is a problem? Then we have an error. Function, and then error. On error, then we want to console error. Console.error. That error. And if I'm not wrong, to prove this, if I hover over, error is of type any. Okay. Well, let's see if this works. So back to the drawing board. And if I go to here and refresh, we get the movie list. There we go. Nice and easy. I'm saying nice and easy, but actually it was just a bit of troubleshooting from what we did. So this is an example of what you guys need to do for your in-class exercise 3. Let me just do one more search, and the search I want to do here is Mongoose version 7, right? Mongoose 7 query with express example, because these are changed, these things, and I want to make sure that Mongoose I didn't miss anything because it's all new. So async, await, so we do an async function, that's for sure. We should put that in there. Async await const Mongoose primary, I don't care about that. Connecting to MongoDB, we did that already. Creating a model, we did. Again, this is I'm just validating, guys, just to make sure that things are. I don't want to tell you something that's not there. We need a model, and searching for records. There we go. Okay, so await, athlete find, sport, tennis, name, age, execute. So that's what that does. That executes the query. but we also use promises, yeah? So query is athlete find, select name and age. Interesting, way better. This is way, way better. Find by one, find method, mongoose require, schema. Well, what about errors? Populate and execute. And we're going to save that query so that the query itself is separate, it looks like, from everything else. This is good. I like it. But what about the error? Mongoose, here it is, main catch error, console log error. Yeah, that's kind of what I did. But I want to do a search, the book model. Okay, good. I made the book model, book instance model. This is good. This is a really good little tutorial, but I'm just curious about promises. So mongoose, one more time, one more mongoose, 7 promises. Example. Query. That's what it is. Promises. Okay. Queries are now promises. Promise itself is what it returns. Then return this. This executes the query. Queries are thenable. Find one then. Should you use exec or await? As far as functionality is concerned, these two are equivalent. However, we recommend using execute because this gives you better stack traces. All right, we can do that. There's the catch. So catch, instead of a function, we catch an error. So wait, find one, and then do a catch. We do a try catch like that. Okay. Interesting. So I'm not quite using this right. I'm going to do a little bit more research on this one because, but this clearly works. I just want to make sure I get the catch properly. So catch, what it does is it's a promise on rejected, the reason if any, and it returns void. And then we just console out that reason. And that should work. Actually, I'm not wrong. Callback is actually when the promise is rejected, returns a promise for the completion of the callback. Yep. This totally works. Okay, so this is an example of a controller, again, that we have for the local function, right? And let me just go through one more time. I'm just going to close all these things for a second just to talk about it so you guys understand, okay? So there's no confusion. So why I was confused is because how I did it before compared to how it's done now is slightly different, but it's not that much different. We're using promises here. This is a JavaScript construct, and I figured it out like this. When I was doing, first of all, we don't need git keep. Let's just get rid of this. The way I figured it out was when I started doing this stuff here, I'm exporting a function. This is the controller function. And display movie list is the name of the controller function, right? We need to pass in request, response, and next because we're using this as middleware for our router. So the router is going to pass the request, response, and next object to the function, and then it's going to return this through. It's going to pass it through, all right? Then we use the movie model to do a find request. We're finding everything. We're not filtering in this case, right? Before, what we used to do is what we saw me do earlier, which was I use a function and then I have an error and a callback. So it's callback. This is not using callbacks anymore. Mongoose is updated and it uses, kind of a synchronous methodology, right? So in async, really, I should be able to put in like async in front of it, no problem. Or the function is an async. So I can say something like export async, this. Right, is what I'm doing, right? And then if I was to do that, then it would pass through it would pass across I would do an async await. I would await for this thing to finish before I do stuff. Here, I don't need to do that because movie find does all that heavy lifting for me, right? I can do a then. It's not a promise, but I can do a then, which acts very much like a promise. And then I can do a catch. So this is kind of like promise syntax. Then basically triggers when find is successful. Catch triggers when find is unsuccessful. So if there was an error, then we would basically output the error. That's what we'll do here, right? However, again, this is something I wasn't expecting, but it's okay. It's all good to go, right? So that's kind of something that would work differently now. And now that we know it works, that's how we made it work here in localhost. This thing that looks like garbage actually isn't garbage. It's a bunch of, this is a compressed JSON format of all the stuff we're getting. To test this function out, if I was going to do this with our friend Postman, if I make a GET request, right? So you can do a GET request, and if I do localhost, try this out with Postman, please. Localhost 3000, and the path is movie-list, and if I do a send request here, then I should get the exact same thing here, but Postman kind of makes it so that it looks nice. That's all it does for us. It kind of returns the data in a nice way. This is what you're going to get. You're actually going to get the data back. And so this is our first iteration of how to get the data locally. Okay, let's put this up on GitHub now. So back to this. That ate up some time, which I did not expect. Okay. Git add dot, git commit -m. We'll say added controller for displaying movie list. Git push, and that's going to be up on GitHub for you in my GitHub repository that I'm sharing with you. Okay, so that's that first part. Last part, which I didn't have a chance to get into. I'm going to mention it today. I think we're going to skip this for next week. I think it's probably the right thing to do. I'm going to go into MongoDB Atlas. If I go look at MongoDB Atlas, if I look that up, it's going to take us to our Atlas database here, right? You need to sign in, or first of all, you need to register and sign in. Here, I'm going to use Google. That's me, right? To sign in with. This is just using third-party authentication, or OAuth, which we're going to cover at some point this semester. And then what I want to do is I want to set up a brand new project. So that's me, right? And I want to make a brand new database deployment. So I want to create, so these are some projects that I made in the past. And I want to make a brand new database. So here I'm at database from a deployment perspective. Let's click create. And it says what type do I want and what's the region that it should go in. So it says dedicated. Now remember, down here, be clear, this is what it's telling us. I'm going to use Azure, right? And I'm also going to use someplace close from a cloud perspective. That's what this is going to do. All right, so here's North America. You can see that that's central US. Virginia is East US, because that's closer to us. And if we had Toronto, which we do, that would be this Canada Central. Notice that the cost went up for that one. Cluster tier, this is important. We want a free cluster tier. So notice it's like 0 cents per hour or whatever, right? And this is our cluster name and all that kind of stuff. Now this is us paying with dedicated, right? If I go to shared, right, then you can see that it's free. Again, we're using Azure, Toronto as a Canadian, Canada Central. There's less data centers that we can use, but this is one we can use. And we can see here that the cluster tier, right, is free. You can also pay $9 a month if you really want more performance. I'm going to choose free, the free cluster, and click create. The cluster name is important. This is cluster 1. You can choose whatever name you want, right? So we can call this movie cluster, just so that way we know what it is, movie cluster, right? And then click create cluster. And what that's going to do, okay, the project has another free cluster. I should be not part of the same cluster. the wrong cluster. Let's make a new project. That's what I need. Let's try this out. So the project name is going to be called MDEV1004 and the summer 2023 semester. And the next. Add members and permissions. No, this is going to be new. Create project, and let's do that cluster again. There we go. Okay, so first we make a project, then we build the database, and we're going to go M03. We're going to do Azure, Toronto Central, and we're going to call this movie cluster. There we go. And create. This is going to take a second to provision. How would you like to authenticate? So there's a couple ways to authenticate to the database when we're changing it. One way is to use username and password, or the other one is to use a certificate. I'm going to use username and password here, right? And the username that I'm going to use right now is going to be Thomas, and my password is not going to be this. It's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? And I know it's really stupid and it's simple, but I'm doing it because I want to be able to kind of use something that's realistic. Okay, that's something we can access and play around with. Okay, so I'm going to click Create User, and if it says the password provided is too weak, whatever, let's just auto-generate it then. That's fine. So here's the auto-generated thing. I'm going to copy this thing because I'm going to need it in a second, and then Create User. That's fine. Now it says where would you like to connect from? My local environment. Okay, cool. And now it also says add entries to your IP access list. This is important. It's kind of picking up my access list here. And what I'm going to say is my access list is going to be 0.0.0.0, which is going to be anywhere, right? And I'm going to click on add entry. And what this does is it allows me to access from anywhere. This is my current IP address. I'm going to remove this one. Remove this one. So it allows access from any IP address. This is important too. And then click Finish and Close. And then go to Databases. Here's my database, right? And right now it doesn't have anything, and I want to be able to connect to it. This is the remote database we're using right now for Atlas, right? So here's the movie cluster that I called this a cluster. I'm going to click Connect, and Connect basically gives us some options. It says, hey, how do you want to do this, right? Do I need drivers, MongoDB for VS Code, work with your data in VS Code already for a VS Code environment, a shell, how does it do it? Compass, definitely not, and here's a driver. Let's try this one. What does it give me? It says, well, this is the connection right here. MongoDB plus serve, Thomas, the password, which we know we have, right? And movie cluster is what it's going to be called. And this is the actual location, okay? So that's what we want. And replace password with the password for me. So that is the local URI, okay, the remote URI. Let's go back to here and go to my configuration and go to my db.ts and just put in that password for a second. I'm just going to kind of pipe it in right there. That's the password that I'm going to use in a second. But what I want to do is I want to grab this whole line right here and put it right here. So this is the new connection script, right? And I'm going to grab this thing, which is the password that I saved, and put that right in here. There we go. That's the password. Save. And then let's try this. Let's try connecting with my remote URI. Okay, so if I try remote URI instead of my local URI, you can just switch it here. So if I go back to my app.ts here, in my app.ts right now, I'm connecting with my local URI. Let's try connecting with my remote URI, right? And press save. And if my server's still going, so if I check it out, you can see that we're still connected to MongoDB. However, if I do a search on here, localhost, and if I refresh, you're going to get nothing. You're going to get 0. because there is nothing online, right? I want to import my stuff to my MongoDB Atlas. That's what I want to be able to do, right? So we're now connected to MongoDB Atlas instead of my local server. And I want to kind of import data, right? So now it says like, okay, so here is my movie cluster, and it says my database deployments. I want to create, now here's my browse collections. Here's my browse collections. I don't have a collection, right? And it says, look, it has a movies collection that I want in there. I want to insert documents or import data. I want to import data in here, right? So if I go insert document, I can certainly insert one document at a time. But it'd be nice if, by the way, notice how this worked, right? Let's just drop the test database. The database should be called, the database should also be called movies, right? By the way, where is that? That's in the db.ts, right? So there's a movie cluster, right? And what I want to do is the collection should be called movies, which is what we're going to kind of make, okay? So that's what this does. And we shouldn't have a test database. It says, look, load my own data, load a sample data set, right? This is kind of neat. So I'm going to say add my own data, right? And it says here's the database name and additional preferences and how to do this kind of stuff. That's neat. Here's the collection name. So the database name is going to be movies. The collection name is also going to be called movies, right? And it says here, it says capped collection, time series collection, or clustered index collection. All right, we're not going to do that. If I click create, it says, okay, well, we can make this for you. Here's the movies collection. And then, but how do I get data in here, right? So it says more options. Can't do it that way, right? And if I add insert a document, inserts one document at a time. That's not what I want. So what if I went the other way around? What if I said, okay, I don't want that. So we'll say movies. Here's my movies collection, right? Let's drop this one. Last thing I'm going to do, guys. And then let's load a sample data set. Now, it says sample data set, 350 megabytes. If I load a sample data set, that's not what I want. How do I kind of get data from a file, which is what I want, right? So that's kind of something that I want to get. And let's look it up. So we'll say something like import data from JSON MongoDB Atlas. How do I do that? So it says load file with Mongo import. Okay, this is the exact same thing. So now this is interesting. I can do the exact same stuff with our CLI, right? Mongo import, right? So I can say plus the database, plus the IP access list, plus, right? So this is kind of like the way I would do it locally with our URI. So this is how it would be done using a URI, right? And then my collection and all this kind of stuff. Exactly what I would normally do, right? Locally, which means that I got to do a way of using Mongo import with a URI, which is what I have already. So that is super easy to do. Let's see if this can work, okay? So back to this, I have all this. This is my actual connection to my database, right here. And let's see if I can do that. So just gonna pull up another one of these and let's add one of those, another terminal. And we're gonna do that Mongo import stuff. Ready? Except this time we're gonna say Mongo import and then -- URI equals to, I'm just gonna make sure that the syntax is it's quotations. And I'm going to grab all of this part, put that in there, right? And then --db is equal to movies, right? --collection is equal to movies, -- file is equal to, now again, this is something that I'm missing. I don't have the JSON file here, so let me just copy it in before I continue. So courses, Georgian, grab the JSON file, copy it, and then as a result, you'll have this on your ICE as well, ICE3, and I'll talk about how to finish ICE3 in a second. It's not that difficult. And then, yeah, where we have it, which is in our downloads. And right in ICE3, I'm going to put it in here. So paste, there's movies.json. And now I can continue. File is equal to ./movies.json. And then we need that JSON array as an option. So JSON array, right? And let me just make sure that that's correct, because I don't want to mess up. Use array index. I think I'm right. JSON array. Yep. And that's it right here. That should be the same thing. And let's see if I'm right. Mongo inter is not recognized. Mongo import. Mongo import. Oh yes. Yes, this is interesting because we have to do this for my command line because Visual Studio Code was open before, and of course that's why I did it like this. Let's quit and let's go Mongo import. It does recognize, no, Mongo import, Mongo import. Let's try that out. Yeah, it does work here. Okay, and we're in the right folder? No. Lessons. Oh. Okay. Almost there, guys. Isn't this wonderful? Love making these things happen. CD space. And the reason why this is happening is because I hadn't closed down Visual Studio Code, and that's why it didn't happen. Let's just try that again. Mongo import. Good. Excellent. Now what I can do, theoretically, is grab that line that I just typed in from Visual Studio Code. Sorry. Copy it. And then go back here. My terminal. There it is, and paste it. And then press enter, and it should work. There we go. So I sent it to the remote URI this time instead of my local URI. And if I go back up to MongoDB Atlas, and if I refresh, we should see some data. And there it is, my friends. So the data has been sent here. We don't need the test database anymore. This can be gone. Tests. Yeah. But there you go, there you have it. So now you have 10 pieces of data in exactly the order we want, right? And one thing to notice is that we imported all this stuff. And one thing is you can see that genre is now an array that has 3 elements, action, adventure, and fantasy. Directors is an array that has George Lucas in this particular case. And then you can see that these are all arrays, whether they have 1 or more elements, which is exactly what we planned. Very, very good. So now that we've got this here, if I go back to my local host, which is here, and if I refresh, then we should see the data coming into play, right? So let's see why that's not working, because it's not working again. But we do have the data now up online, right? So save, and let's see what's going on here. So it says we're connected, right? And here's my app, and there's the movie list. And what happens? Disconnected from data. We know, here's something we do know, we know that if I go to test it, we know that the server's up because if I just do this, we still get Express. But if I do /movie list, we get this, which is actually not what we want. So here's going back to what that thing was telling me. Locally, we're good because it's super fast. But remotely, we're not good because with the promise that we had, because the time it takes for it to return data, and to test this, if I was to go to my Postman, and let's do the URI now with this. Let's check this out. If I go send, you can see now we don't get any data yet, right? And the reason why we don't get any data is because we're going and doing a round trip to the server and coming back, and we're not waiting long enough, right? Because the server is responding. Like if you look at the data is there. Movies, here's the movies collection. There's the movies database, right? And if I go back up to overview, just to show you, right? And if I go back up to my project, right? So let's go back to the project just to show you. Here's the database, right? And if I click connect, right? And if I go to MongoDB for VS Code, right? Notice it says, here's the cluster again. Same cluster as we had before. Everything is exactly the same. So the connection string, no difference, okay? That's not a difference. But what is happening? What is it that we're getting a problem? We're not getting an error. We're getting no data back. We're getting no data back from up online. A couple of reasons what that could be happening. One, it doesn't like the IP address. So when I'm connecting here from locally from Georgian, it doesn't like the fact that I'm trying to connect out to the port is being blocked. The connection coming inbound from Georgian to MongoDB Atlas is being blocked. Okay, so again, we can try this at home, and I haven't done this yet, but I will try it at home when I get there. The alternative is that I'm not getting data back because I'm not waiting. So, but this is what I'd like you to do for your in-class exercise. Take it as far as you can, which means let's go back and talk about the process. So the first part is you can see that it's not getting an error. We're not getting an error from this thing. See how it says 200, right? 200 means everything is good, right? And if I go back and to see what this looks like, you know, for example, here's my local host. You can see that the reason why I'm not getting any data here is because, you know, it could be being blocked from Georgian or whatever, or it could be that I'm not waiting. I'll find that out for next week. But for this week, what I'd like you to do at the very minimum, right, is the following, right? And by the way, I don't believe it's that reason. I think it's probably what I'm doing wrong, which is I'm not using an await situation. I'm executing the query here in my movie query right here, but I'm using promises, and I'm not getting any data back, right? So I'm waiting for this to come back, and this isn't giving me an error. So catch isn't giving me a problem because, well, it's returning nothing, right? Because what I need to do is wait for this to happen, right? And just like we saw earlier with the documentation, that's my feeling, okay, off the top of my head. But if you look at the documentation for what we said, let me just go back to Mongoose for 1 second. Here's the documentation for Mongoose, and if I go to queries, and if you look at the new query for Mongoose, here it is, right, where it's giving us examples. So we're going to say an await and then an execute, right? And we're awaiting for the model to come back with data. That's what's happening, right? We're executing, the model, right? So on await. So if I go back to this, and just like we have the model.find, if I said something like await, see how that kind of lights up, it says that await expressions are only allowed with async functions and at the top levels of the modules. Did you mean to use this as async, right? Well, no, because our documentation clearly says we need to use an await or an execute, right? Which means we should do a try catch, right? Instead of this. So let's try that instead. So one more time, I'll try this out. So I'm just going to comment this out. It's a beautiful thing about little functions like this. And then we would do a try catch. Here we go. And we would do a movie.find, right? And we would do an execute, right? We would do an execute on that one. But then what we need to do is we need to return data, right? So what happens if we're good, you know, kind of thing. And what would happen is if we were good, then find, what it does is, again, it's hard to see what it returns, but it says creates a find query, and then we kind of list it. So we say something like let query equal to this, right? And here's the query that we're going to get back. And then what we want to do is query dot, and then we can say then we can actually do the thing that we want to do here, just like we normally did. So we say after this, then we would do a then, right? Where then would be a function passing in the data. Here's our data. And then we would do a res JSON. And then on error, then we just do a console error. Console error on error. Would make this error so it doesn't get confused. That's the other way to do it, which is kind of equivalent to this way, but I'm just using movie.find and saving the query and using it that way. Let's try that, and let's see if that makes a difference, and I'm not sure if it will. If I refresh, yeah. Now, and if we try it locally, there's another test to try. If I try it locally here, so if I switch from the remote URI to a local URI, let's try this. So let's go to the local URI. So local URI, local URI, there we go. And if I press save, and if I go back to this and refresh, we get our data. So to me, this means two things. One, the data that we're getting back is being blocked, right, by Georgian. That's possible. I'm going to try this at home. And the option is there's something else that's wrong, and this is it. So what I want you guys to do for in-class exercise 3, these are the instructions, okay, is, and I'm going to put this up on GitHub again one more time, just to give you the final version. So I'm going to say clear git add dots, git commit -m. We'll say okay. We'll say tested remote connection, and then git push. So what we want to do is, let's go through each one. One, restructure your files, right? So locally, so that they look like this. That's the first thing that you should do. Restructure your files. Step 2, once you've restructured your files, like we said earlier, part 2 is you're going to have in your app.ts, you're going to import Mongoose and your database. We kind of created a database connection. One of them is local for the movies database, right? As well as we did the remote URI here for the movies database. One thing I could probably do is, does it connect to movies? Could be that. Because I'm not connecting to anything. I'm not telling you where to connect. Oh damn, one more time. So I'm going to kill myself if this is what it is. Remote URI, save. I doubt it. Yes. Oh my God, that's what the problem was. All right, so I fixed it. So that is the issue. The issue is I need to tell it what database to connect to. Yes, I remember now. All right, so one thing I fixed, there we go, is this has to be movies if you're going to do remote URI. Because I didn't specify where it was, so it was connecting to test. Test doesn't exist, and that's why it was having a problem, right? And the hint that I just got was when I went here to my data set, and if I look at my database, right? So if I browse collections, we always got this test, right? Well, the reason why we got test is because we're trying to connect to something that doesn't exist. And of course, it's just going to create the test database. And that's why it did what it did. I don't need the test database. I need the movies database. And that's why it was doing whatever. So Georgian doesn't block it. That's what the remote URI does. I just need to put movies at the end of that. Hoo-hoo. Okay, back to what I need. So we restructured. We connected to our database. We created a configuration file for a local URI, which we tested locally. I want you to show this in your video. Show me that you can connect locally to your database, because we're going to do some stuff locally, just like I did when I staged things. And then I connected remotely as well, right? And then I created a remote URI afterwards by actually creating the cluster and the MongoDB Atlas project by registering with MongoDB Atlas. You need to do that, and you saw the steps. I created a project. After I created a project, I created a cluster. And then what I use is the same command line for importing that I use locally. I just used the brand new connection string. So again, what I did was, if you go back to overview, there is, if I click database under deployment, there is a connect button, and the connect button, if I chose MongoDB for VS Code, you can see that it gives me the connection string, but that doesn't include the password that I created from my account, all right, which was that funny password they gave, okay? The only thing this doesn't do, which I didn't read, is it didn't add in the last part, which is the database you're connecting to. It doesn't have that, all right? It didn't include that here. I'm sure if we kind of went through this, and if I went to the shell, right, it gives you the exact same thing. So I have MongoDB shell installed. I don't have the MongoDB shell installed, right? If I said, so here's Mongosh, it even does this or whatever, look for Windows. I have it installed. Here's Mongosh. And actually shows you how to connect to it. There's my username and all that stuff. Another way to do it with Mongosh, like directly to the shell. So if I wanted to connect and manipulate the database directly, I could do it that way as well. So I created the database, and then what I did was I imported the data through Mongo import, which I talked about earlier today, right, into the remote database here. And I did that with this command, right, which is basically Mongo import -- URI, and then the database that I want to do. Here's my database, right? With movies.json, the file I gave you as an example, and I converted it to a JSON array. This allowed me to import the data to the remote server as well as locally, which is what we did, okay? Just to go over it again. And then once I had the data in place, it was a matter of, I thought it was my query that was wrong, and I showed you there's two ways to do that with promises. One way to do that was after I've connected, as an example, I go to my routes. If you look at the routes is here, right? So routes, here's routes. And if you look at routes goes to and imports the display movie list function from the movie controllers. That's what it does. Notice how I read that movie controllers, the movie controller, right? And once I have that, I just call display movie list, and I pass in the request, response, and next object right in there. Okay, that's what happens there. And if I go back to the controller, right? The controller itself there's two ways of doing it. You can do it this way, and I'm guessing, here's my guess, if I was to comment this one out, the original way I had it, and uncomment this part, you can do it either way, guys. And if I save this part, and if I go back up to, let's just use Postman here, and if I do a send, you can see that I still get my data from the remote site, even with this other way of doing it, which is this way. Okay, so both ways work just fine. Okay, and I'll just put it back. So I'll say git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say demonstrated both methods to get data. Git push, okay? So that's what that is. There we go. And then And then once we did this, of course, I need to use the movie model, and the movie model was here under the models folder. So movie model, and notice how it says movie models. That's what it is, movie model. So in the movie model, I imported schema and model from Mongoose, which is what I did. I created an iMovie interface, and then down in here, I created a movie schema. The one part that I'm missing that you could put in is the collection name. So one thing is, if you do this, if you press thing that you can put in, you can kind of specify the collection, right? Which is, the collection would be the movies collection. You could do that, right? Where you specify the collection name, right? I didn't do that this time around, but you could. It's more specific. You don't need to do that. And as soon as you create the schema, right? And again, your schema is almost like this, except you have a poster link. Then we can say let movie, you can also use const here, is equal to a movie model. We're creating a movie model here, and we're exporting movie, this movie object, as a default. In fact, I could do it all in one line if I wanted to, no problem. So I'm just backtracking here for all the things that we had to do. These are all things you need to demonstrate that you can do for yourself, in your little video that you're making for in-class exercise 3. Okay, so in-class exercise 3, I want you to try and make it work locally and remotely. Locally first, right? Show me your database. Again, you can use what I did before, which I used the manual way of using a server locally on the PC with some kind of command prompt for a client. Or if you're going to use it on your Mac, I'm just going to X out of this one for now, so get rid of this. If I'm going to do it on my Mac, and if you look at the Mac side of the house, here's the Mac side, you can see I did the exact same thing. I ran my MongoDB database locally, and then here I used Mongosh, right, to connect. Mongosh is the client for MongoDB. Show these things in your video, right? Again, you can do it with locally on your PC or Mac. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, so that's this. So that's the Mac side. We talked about installation, how to install MongoDB. We talked about how to import data using the connection string. We kicked off a little server for an Express server, right? What we did. So we did quite a bit of work, and this is my final version of my in-class exercise 3 that you'll see as an example for what yours might look like. Okay, please don't just copy mine word for word. Try and make it work, because remember that part of this semester is trying to understand how all of this knits together properly when it comes to making your own API with Express. Okay. We talked about Mongoose and how to configure Mongoose. We talked about TypeScript and the difference between using Mongoose by itself and Mongoose with TypeScript, which makes it a little bit more challenging, but not impossible to understand, as you saw. I figured it out, and I'm sure if I can do it, you guys are all very smart. You can do it as well, especially with my examples that I've given you. Talked about how to make a query and how this has changed from version 6 to version 7. Big changes. And if you take a look at version 6, and if you read the docs version 6 compared to version 7, this is what I was struggling with when I went to queries and I went to find. Well, the find had a whole, well, actually even in version 6 they had it, but it had a whole different way of doing things. Maybe it was from version 5. Wow, that's a lot of changes. But I doubt it. I fully remember that they had a totally different way than this. Yeah, see, the documentation is missing. They had different documentation examples up here for version 6 and version 5, for sure, because it was done differently. Even version 4. I wonder if version 4 works. Well, here, for sure, it's going to be different, because making queries. But, yeah. But anyways, that was when we found. We found the query was broken, right? And you needed a callback function. And now the callback functions have been removed, right? And that's an issue. So no more callback function, right? Now it's promises, which is kind of interesting, right? So that's what we found. So that's that gone. We talked about interfaces and how they don't do anything in terms of when they emit an interface from TypeScript to JavaScript, the weight of the interface is 0. You don't lose anything when you do that. So it's really good for code hinting. and code coloring. We got some examples online from both ChatGPT and other places to make things work. Did a bit of research to find the problem, right, that I was experiencing, because I was surprised, right? And then we made it work. We ended up making it work with everything we had. And finally, once we made it work locally, we deployed remotely. So show both places. Again, if you were here, I would say, any questions? I'm sure this one is going to give you a few to work with. And that's part of it. The challenge here is good. Remember, people are nervous about in-class exercises, and I've got some direct messages and emails saying, hey, Tom, I'm having trouble trying to set all this up. Make an appointment, guys. Please, I'm asking you to make an appointment. I think it's the most important thing. This way I can do one-on-one with you guys. Again, I don't have unlimited hours every week, but you can certainly make an appointment. Give me your hour that you're available, your hours throughout the week, and I'll try and fit you in and do it during those times. If I can't, I'll let you know that I can't make it work, but I want to help. Okay, you're not alone in this just because I made the video. I want to help you out. Please connect with me to make sure that you get your in-class exercise 3 done, which we're on the road to your assignment 1. And once we've done this, we've done the heavy lifting. Again, if you look at the schedule, we've done Node and Express. Next week, we're going to do more CRUD operations, creating, updating, and deleting data, how to do that, and deploying to render.com. So this, we only deployed locally to, to MongoDB Atlas, but we're actually going to take the next step and take your little API that we've just made and deploy it remotely. And that's going to be the subject of next week's in-class exercise 4. Okay? Otherwise, that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for being patient with me. I know I went over about 37 minutes or more, but that's what happens when you troubleshoot. So thank you so much for sticking around. And if you've watched this video, and I'll see you guys next week. I'll stop recording now.